start? Okay, recording.
Recording.
This is the St. Louis Unix Users Group. I'm the vice president. Not that anybody else will run for vice president. I always do it so that I'm not president. Okay. We have our meeting is kind of unique. We have a beginner tutorial kind of thing at the front end that may involve stuff that applies to enterprise stuff or not, whatever. And then in between we have announcements and so forth and so on. And then we go into our main presentation. Brian Bilgere, is it?
Bilgere.
Bilgere. I can never say
That's
it
right.
properly.
Nobody can.
So, why are you pointing at me?
Because you're talking now.
Oh,
When he starts talking, I'll point at him.
okay.
And you're better looking than me.
And you make a great
You got a
picture on
great
the camera.
Hey, I'm a celebrity on the internet for 10 minutes, right? Did everybody see that on our discuss list where it pointed to the YouTube thing? I called it all right.
I'll have to go look for it.
You had your 15 seconds of fame?
You got like 10 minutes
about
talking
10
to Leo.
minutes, you know. Anyway, let's go on. Take over.
Oh man, you were doing so well.
Who is he?
I'm Brian.
Oh, Brian. Okay.
Hi, Brian.
Brian.
Hi. Hi, my name's Brian.
I'm an alcoholic. Oh, sorry.
Exactly.
I'm a Unix user.
Recovering Microsoft.
That's the after meeting.
Yeah, I still end up doing a lot of the Microsoft stuff. So, the typical story is the same story every time Gary drags me into one of these things. Hey, Brian. Good to speak at the next meeting. Oh, hey, Brian. I know you had a presentation. It seems to me you talked about something that you wanted to give, and I say, no, Gary, I don't. But he talks me into it. So, we were at the Muny, and my wife and I, we went to see Kinky Boots, which is a show about a drag queen helping out a boot manufacturer, or shoe manufacturer. And I hear, Brian! So
What are you doing next week? Who was calling you?
Exactly.
Who was calling you from the distance? The drag queen or the boot manufacturer?
Gary.
Oh, the drag queen.
Gary's out there at Kinky Boots at the Muny recruiting me to speak yet again. So it's always on his mind. Anyway, so that's why I call it Kinky Unix Boots. I was kind of hard-pressed to come up with a topic because I've been really busy. So since it's the beginner introduction thing, it was just meant to be a quickie overview of what it means to boot a computer and some of the things that are around that. And my world is mostly OpenBSD. Most people here are probably Linux people, but most of this applies.
Okay, this is the Unix meeting, not the Linux meeting.
Well, yeah, I know, and I understand. I appreciate that.
So we like all versions of Unix at this time.
And there is a Unix, or an OpenBSD group up in Chicago that if they're meaning to go to, but I never get out there. So.
It's a bit of a drive.
It is a bit of a drive.
So it's only an hour and a half flight. But then
Yeah.
you gotta get there from the airport.
I'm busy. Really busy.
Yeah.
So,
So going to Kansas City is faster by car than by air.
yeah. By the time, yeah, not for you, he's a pilot. So when you're booting a computer, there's a lot of, well, how many people are fairly new to computers or Linux or anything? Okay, so everybody is super advanced. So this topic is probably kind of pointless. So anyway, let's
It's
still a good review because a lot of us never even think about it.
Okay.
Booting just happens.
Yeah.
It's there. It's
Who
done.
thinks about it?
Or it fails and you call somebody to help out.
And being an OpenBSD guy, we're not going to make it easy. We'll refer to man pages because that's our world, right? So, anyway, so when you're setting up a computer, at least on the Linux side, more so than in our world, we don't use grub at all, or at least I don't. I just set it up. So you've got software like grub that you can use to set up your booting. We can go over that stuff. I should show some of these. And when you're setting up your disk drive, you need to set up a master boot record. So the master boot record is when you're starting your boot, it's got to go someplace on disk to get all the information it needs to actually do do the boot process. And
Too busy.
I'm too busy.
Does that show up like that?
Oh, actually, so I wanted to mention too that for Steve. Oh, there it is.
I'm here.
I did it all with Racket's slideshow. It's all basically a Lisp presentation manager that you use to do slides and stuff. So figured I'd better tell you before I do that. So I spoke about Lisp a lot before. It was interesting. Let's see. Sorry. So there are a bunch of man pages and Wikipedia pages dealing with the whole booting process. And some of the things that you'll need to deal with potentially if you're multi-booting a machine. I never multi-boot myself, so I don't have to deal with this. But if you want to configure things to run both Windows and Linux or one of the BSDs or whatever, you need to be able to set that up. And your source of information, this is a great source of information. On the GNU site, there's a manual, which is the multi-boot 2 specification. It goes into a pretty good amount of detail about all of the multi-boot processes and the boot sources, all that stuff. So it is really good to read. Probably not real good to memorize, and it's great reading material for when you're going to that.
Don't the font about 4 sizes?
Pardon?
Don't the font about 4 sizes?
You know what?
Control plus. Then it'll scroll still too fast, I won't be able to read it.
You can't read it anyway.
Yeah, actually, my Control Plus isn't working.
Oh, not working?
Depends what drawing you do.
Definitions. No, it's in the browser. There you go. Couple more.
You hit control and then rotate and roll the mouse wheel.
No, he's got it. He got it.
Oh, okay, good.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Sorry.
No problem. We're friendly, friends.
So I just built this machine. This machine died hard. Rebuilt it Saturday. My backup was bad, so now I got to go find another backup. So I totally rebuilt everything over the weekend, and I was totally in crunch mode for this.
You can do a presentation on that next month.
Oh yeah, actually last month I told Gary my machine had died. It had died a couple months ago, actually, and I haven't had a chance to mess with it. So at the last meeting, he wanted me to come and debug it live, and that was going to be my presentation, debugging it live. And I thought, I'm tired of debugging things that are broken live when I come to these, because you get one incompatibility or another, and it's no fun. At least not for me. Anyway, the multi-boot 2 specification is good to understand as far as all the offsets and everything is concerned. There is the volume boot record, so your disk is split up into different volumes. So your boot sector and your different partitions. So this is a good reference to understand how you want to lay out those, or how that layout affects your machine. Lots of detail on this. There's and all these are in that set of slides. There's a partition alignment page out here on Wikipedia that goes into a lot more detail. I wanted to go over dmessage, which to me is if you're booting and trying to get a machine up to use the first time, at least for me in in the OpenBSD world, I use it constantly because a lot of times we don't have as much support as other operating systems, or we want to know what the exact configuration of the machine is. And has everybody used dmessage? Or does anybody not use dmessage? Okay, you haven't. Okay, good. This is virgin territory. I like that. So I have a very sensitive mouse pad on here, so every time I touch it.
Are you able to embiggen that?
And bacon.
And big in it? I think I can. Yes.
And big in it?
I thought I could.
For a terminal, control middle mouse, I think. There it is.
Under view.
Try
Control middle
view.
mouse didn't do it for me.
It's
So
under
View.
view.
Look at view.
view. Oh, sorry.
Zoom in, says control plus.
Control plus.
Oh, so it is control plus. It looked kind of grayed out.
Oh,
It was kind of grayed out.
well, see if you can select it. Well,
It worked.
it looks grayed out, but it isn't really.
Sorry.
One more would be even better. Yes.
Awesome. All right, so dmessage is really handy because it gives you all the diagnostics that happen when a machine boots up. So it's doing probes of different subsets of the operating system. So it's going out looking at BIOS or ACPI or whatever. So in our world, we do end up having a lot of devices that aren't supported with drivers. At least in the OpenBSD world, we don't do binary blobs, and so we don't take blobs from manufacturers like NVIDIA or somebody like that. If it can't be audited, if the source code can't be seen by the OpenBSD developers, it's not going to go in. At least in the operating system itself. It can go in as something else. But
Since I'm a quote-unquote virgin, could you break down some of these acronyms you're using?
oh, sure. Like which ones?
Well, globs and lobs and blobs mean different things to different industries.
Oh, okay. So in the OpenBSD world, they talk a lot about binary blobs. So if you're going to download a device driver, like an NVIDIA driver, it's just a blob of...
Well, binary large object is what it stands for.
Yeah, but we kind of look at it as if it's something that's very opaque, they don't want it included in the operating system. They don't want the government or anybody else to have some way that they've got a hook into our operating system because they paid NVIDIA to leave a little thing in there. So that doesn't exist in the OpenBSD world. It does exist in the Linux world. Who knows whether any of that stuff is ever exploited or not? You know, you just
Probably.
don't know. You hope not, but there may be ways that some enterprise and government can find ways to insert code and people not know about it. So anyway, that's why it's not allowed in the OpenBSD world. We have different processes that start up when you start the computer. One of them is this kind of probing process to go out there and say, for each of these subsystems, is it up and running? Is it configured? And what's it configured to do? So I don't know what all these tables are within this ACPI section, but if you're having to go out there and do any sort of diagnostics as far as why some piece of software isn't working, you may need to go out and get this information, pass it back to the developers or whoever to help you debug your issue. It's handy for knowing how many CPUs you've got, what they're set at. So we've got CPU 0, 1, 2, 3. So we've got 4 4s that are set up, and then, or 4 threads at least. Here we can see these devices aren't configured, so in the OpenBSD world, that means there's no device driver available for these, most likely. It may be available. It may be available as an additional package, or it might not have been released yet. But if it's at all too proprietary, it won't have a device driver. Linux has a dmessage command as well. So let's see. You can see your display information. So anyway, it's a very handy device, and one of the program. And one of the things that's really useful for is seeing what drives are there. You can look for something like LUN, or you can, if you want to look for a specific device, you can look for SD0 and see what's out there, what's configured for SD0. So in this case, it's a Samsung SSD that I added when my hard drive died, painfully. So that's what that is. Let's see. Within OpenBSD, there's a series of there's a boot sequence, and it's going to be the same kind of thing within the Linux world. You've got some sort of program. In our world, it's BIOS boot that starts up, and BIOS boot kicks off everything else. So BIOS boot BIOS boot is that first stage of the system. You can see there it loads the second stage, and it's really what gets everything going. So after BIOS boot, it's going to load. Boot. So boot's going to be loaded by BIOS boot, and boot is what goes out there and probes for the console devices, sets up the protected mode environment, detects your memory, looks for APM support.
Stan, you have a question?
I changed my mind.
You sure?
Well, I asked the question in my mind, and I realized, no, that's not possible. I was going to ask if BSD uses info pages like Linux does. Probably
No,
not.
I don't know if we may
answer
be
is
able
yes.
to, but
It does.
well,
It can,
Well, I imagine it can, but
because it's a open source project and you can download it, compile it, and use it as you like.
but generally we use our man pages because our man pages rock. So we've got great man pages. They go into a great amount of detail. You see some of the systems out there, they've got just bare bones detail. Ours are kind of brutally long to deal with, but if you ever get out on our mailing list and you come out with some lame question that says, hey, I'm trying to figure out what the C partition is on this hard drive because it looks bigger than the other partitions, somebody's going to flame you, you know, for wasting everybody's time. And they want to see that people say that the OpenBSD community is not really friendly. It's not that they're not friendly, it's just they expect you to do some homework before you show up. So
Wait until Theo has about 5 years.
yeah, well, you've been flamed by Theo, I haven't, so. And you don't use it very much
Not as
anymore.
smart as he is?
Pardon?
Does he get upset if you don't know as much as he does, or does he get upset if you know more than he does?
I don't know. I think he just doesn't suffer fools. I mean, it's kind of like Linus.
Grumpy old man.
I don't think he's grumpy. It's just he doesn't. He's not into the stupidity. You know, it's not a beginner's operating system. I guess is a good way.
Everybody has to start somewhere.
You do, but
Yeah,
still
no.
expects you to do your
But-
homework.
but beginners don't start with OpenBSD.
Nah.
Right.
Why bother?
Because there are some significant advantages to it.
Yes.
What are those? I don't know. I mean,
Every line of code on the entire operating system is audited by somebody on the team. It's a big one.
It's a real big one. So it's all audited. It's
But they don't have any reproducible builds yet.
pardon?
They just don't have reproducible builds in OpenBSD.
No reproducible builds.
Binary blobs are different depending on if there's a timestamp included in the package builds.
Oh, jeez. Microsoft does that, which means you can't ever tell if you compile the same thing, just, they're all different.
Well, they release it generic. They release a stable and the
Yeah.
names of stable, current, and whatever releases that are out
Leading
there.
edge.
Yeah. So as long as you're loading up one of the supported ones, you're at least going to get support, or one of the as long as you're loading the non-current one, you're more likely to get support. Let's see. I guess I need to speed up. Right? So you've got the BIOS boot. We have a Pixie Boot that's available. So if you've got a Pixie device, a network device that you want to boot from, you can boot via a Pixie loader. Boot, we just talked about, is the system bootstrap. Boot.conf, if you want to have any startup files that you want to modify, you can use boot.conf or boot.conf.local, I guess. There's a /BSD, so that's where our kernel image is stored. We've got the SP version of it, which is single processor, an MP version of it, which is multiprocessor, and an RD version of it, which is for recovery, or if you want to do an install of a new system. So we can boot from all of those, and I assume you have analogous things in the Linux world. I used to use it a lot. It's been years, so I spent a lot of time with Gen 2, and I haven't spent a lot of time with Gen 2. Let's see. Next time I'll show you. So when you're booting any of the Unixes, you've got let's see, rc.d. So as your system boots up, the system will go into rc.d, and I guess are you still using that structure in the Linux world? No. We are.
It's system D now.
Oh, that's right.
Well, not all distros. There's still some out there that use the old stuff.
Slackware, I guess, is the stuff. So,
Yeah, everybody mainstreams on system D. Red Hat, SUSE, Debian.
So in rc.d, you've got all the startup files. So if you want to start up NFS, there's an NFS daemon that sits out there, or at least the code to start that up. So all your startup scripts are out there. In our world, and I don't know if you've quit hitting this. I need to disable the stupid mouse pad. We have we've got an examples directory, which is really handy for us. I don't know if you've got the same thing or not, but all the possible conf files that we've got that can go out in Etsy. We've got examples in Etsy examples. So if you want to customize that's not a good example, is it? So if you want to install a printer or something, you can grab a print cap and uncomment it, change it to the things you need to get your stuff printer on. I hate printers with a passion.
Cups is your friend.
Yeah, it is. So anyway, that's the configuration files in rc.d, well, in Etsy rather, I'm sorry. Let's see what else do I have here. So that's probably about it. Really wasn't sure what skill level I was supposed to target or.
It's always good to see everything, give you ideas of what you're missing.
Yeah, it's been great switching over to OpenBSD. It really kind of forced a change of thought, and then I've stuck with it since I got
How well does BSD deal with UEIF and all that magic stuff? Secure?
If you install your own
Fine enough.
keys, sets, yeah, it doesn't matter, it's before the environment's going to use. It's not really a concern. But I mean, if you're talking about the installers,
Yes.
you would have to install your own key set with your UEFI environment. Remember when Aaron Durbin gave the talk?
I don't remember what I had for breakfast.
2 years ago, we had a core boot demonstration by the primary author here.
Okay.
He explained how all that environment works. And I have his presentation, and if you want to see it.
Will the current BSD install on the UFI system?
I'm sorry?
Will the current BSD install on a UFI system?
I don't think. We can try.
So you would have to install your own key set into the BIOS and then sign your installer with that key set for it to work without any bypass. Otherwise, you just have to disable it.
Okay. So the answer is no.
That's probably what we need to do. Yeah.
Well, the issue is that a lot of people don't want to install a key set in their BIOS because it's extremely difficult depending on the vendor.
Well, both Mint and Susie do it on a Magic Boot.
They have a generic key set that's signed by the Linux Foundation.
Okay.
OpenBSD doesn't have a foundation that's
Yeah.
willing to butt fist with Microsoft so much, because Microsoft controls the root keys for UP.
The root keys?
Yeah, for UFI.
That'll make you nervous, won't it? That's why Core Boot won't touch it. And all your Linux Chrome devices and all that stuff, they have no UFI on
But Microsoft loves Linux.
Yeah, but if Microsoft mucks with it, they kill all their machines too, so.
Actually, almost anything can kill machines.
So on the Microsoft topic, have you seen the Linux sucks for this year, where Brian Lundig talks about Microsoft's love for Linux, the embrace
Well,
of extend.
people buy more Azure units and time slots if they can run Linux there.
Right.
Azure today is hosting more Linux.
It's
Yeah.
always,
Yeah. Well, I mean, they actually admitted it recently.
I have inside knowledge, it's always good.
So if you get a chance to watch the video, Brian Lundig, he does the Linux sucks every year if you haven't seen it. But the one for this year was really
How do I find that on the web?
Linux sucks videos 2002. You can probably get
On
your-
YouTube?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
So it's a sarcastic title,
Yes.
and that might help him, instead of going down the road of haters.
Yeah, he's a big Linux guy. If you don't know him, so he used to work for Microsoft. He's not a Microsoft fan. He podcasts for Linux, and he does a Linux sucks every year that talks about the deficiencies of Linux, and then also in this case what Linux is facing, which is Microsoft's extend and then embrace and extinguish model of attacking Linux.
He's also doing a lot of stuff for Linux Journal, apparently.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's doing a lot of articles for them. I don't know whether he...
Yeah, just put in Linux sucks on YouTube and you'll get more than you can bear to watch.
Yeah. I mean, he's really good to watch.
Put the word presentation next to it. That might help your search.
You don't need it. Just Linux sucks to 2019.
Huh?
And I think I got about
No, I closed the
25
thing.
videos.
You done?
Dan's walking over here.
No, he's talking about a sarcastic presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely sarcastic.
Yeah.
It's not. He's not a Linux hater.
He's a Linux
Ryan,
lover with
thank
a
you.
funny
Appreciate
title.
It's always thought-provoking, really, it is. Okay, for those that aren't familiar with our meetings, we have Gary calls it a sandwich meeting, where we have a beginner stuff, a tutorial, or presentation, or whatever, show the blinking lights, or just show simple things, and they always provoke conversation and participation. Then we go to our middle, where we have announcements and call for help and weird things like that. And we also show things like our website and our calendar coming up. And Gary always goes into all the stuff on the calendar that nobody really cares about, or at least I don't care about.
Well, it's interesting, and it's
Yeah.
stuff you normally,
But sometimes he gets a little over, I think. Whatever. And I can rag on him because he's not going to be here tonight. Okay. Woo. Our website. Calendar. We have a main calendar, and we also have an abbreviated calendar on most of the web pages that show our sponsored meetings. We have a general meeting here. This is we have here. It's an overall Unix topics and so forth, presentations. Make that a little smaller.
Oh, smaller?
Yeah, I guess. You know, I don't want. Today being the 10th, the stuff up at the top with dates, our anniversaries, and the stuff below times and so forth. A lot of good information. People really like it, and we even have a brochure on it. But I don't have any of those printed up right now. But I mean, if you go to our website and find it, a lot of important. I have no idea what happened this month in any of the years. Of course, Gary puts in a lot of those in, and I try to get him to put the year and then say that it's the 25th anniversary or something like that, because if we don't correct it, next year it'll show up as the 25th anniversary, and the year after that...
Here's the 1950.
Yeah, whatever. I can't count that high. I've got my shoes on.
The 70th anniversary IBM.
Yeah. A lot of interesting stuff.
Electronics, let's move the parts.
No. And for the most part, other than the historical items, these are face-to-face meetings in the St. Louis area. We average between 150 and 170 face-to-face technology meetings in St. Louis metro area. Don't put video casts up there, that kind of stuff, unless it's someplace where 5 people are sitting around drinking beer and watching the video cast. Okay? It's got to be something that's a technology interest. And it could be, I've included stuff like, you know, airplane shows and things like that, or the radio lunches or breakfast Phil goes to, and things like that.
What's a micro center item on the weekend?
They're training sessions, sales sessions.
Sales. Okay.
They call them training sessions.
Yeah, and they'll have a slideshow or whatever. I bootlegged their What is Linux thing and made it kind of up to date. I've got it on that newcomer thumb drive. Is there anybody here wants? I've got I've been handing out and loaning people a thumb drive with over 32 gigabytes of videos that are focused toward newcomers and anybody interested in Linux and so on.
Can you click on the 16th, there's a 6 p.m. Atlassian user thing?
Which one?
Yeah, 16, that one right there, yeah.
I think the title says it all.
Free event.
Why is the new town recipe so fun?
And most of these sessions are free. Every once in a while there'll be something, there'll be a fee of $389 or something like that for a bad buffet. You know. And Red Hat has started doing things here in town, but they hardly ever advertise, and we find out about it maybe a day or beforehand or a day after, you know. And then,
They're trying to attract people with checkbooks.
yes.
Or if you already have a registered account.
I have a registered account, but they still like people with checkbooks first.
Yeah,
If you have a registered account, that means you have a checkbook. So, yeah, you're right.
that's true. I guess we could say, does anybody have any announcements to make about anything? Okay, going back to the calendar.
Stanford, you have questions ready?
Chuck's not
We got the lug next week.
Next week is a packet capture session. Ken Johnson's going to be doing that. And,
But how's the pizza?
oh, it's a marvelous pizza.
It's the best in St. Louis.
Yeah,
Pizza's pretty good.
really? Yeah.
The one that I order is better than the others.
Yes. Get it with the extra. Get it with the extra red sauce. It's
Yeah,
marvelous.
so I just ordered extra red sauce, and it's awesome.
It's awesome. It really is. As Carl always says, it's a 5-star restaurant. They just as well be. I guess it is.
It's
Good
great when
pizza.
you don't get the little fishes.
Well, that's what makes it 5
Anchovies.
stars.
I knew I'd get a response out of you.
It deletes a star for every fish.
Well, then I'm about -20 every time I go.
Yeah, I know.
Can't see the dead
They
fish.
just give you a can of them.
And that's the, okay. Also, tomorrow is the St. Louis Area Computer Club meeting. It's usually on the first Thursday of the month, but somehow this month, the first Thursday happened to be Independence Day, and the library was closed. We're meeting at the Thornhill branch, back to their old haunts where they are. And it's, what we do normally is a Linux configuration workshop, and people will come in and they got problems or whatever, and a lot of times they say, bring your laptop, we'll install Linux on it for you. And we can do that. And sometimes we fix things, and Phil or Gary McKee, Phil Bunch or Gary McKee will show up, and if it's some kind of other hardware, I've seen them get an Apple printer working with a Microsoft machine, you know, or whatever.
Ooh, that gives me shivers.
Huh?
That gives me shivers.
Yeah. And, you know, so if those two guys don't show up, I don't know what to tell them, because I always, you know, you can always go to System 76 and buy a Linux box, right? But we do a lot of installs, and it's kind of free format, a lot of one-on-one if there's enough people. It's a good unstructured meeting. That's the best way to say it. And those are the best, I think, the best kind. Following week is the St. Louis Area Computer, the St. Louis Linux Users Group, which we've just covered, with great pizza, except for the anchovies. Of course, that's a matter of preference. And then the following week, on the generally the fourth Tuesday of each month, is the newcomer Linux Users Group. We used to call it the Hazelwood Linux User Group. But Phil pointed out to me that last year it never once met, once only met at the Hazelwood Library, and so we just changed it to newcomer. And it's going to be, I guess it's going to be at Prairie Commons again. And then the following week, month it'll be at Christian Trails, and then it'll come back. So they bounce all over. So check the website for calendar. And that's all I could say for, that's the only announcements I have. Anybody else have an announcement? Hey, Don.
Yes, on my NBC News app, I think it was, I just watched a short documentary interview with Margaret Hamilton. And she's not the Margaret Hamilton who was in Wizard of Oz. She's the Margaret Hamilton who led the software development group for the Apollo program. And it was the first time that we've had software controlling something that people were in, that, you know, what do they call it? When lives are at stake, yeah.
Safety-related side.
And she pointed out a problem in the software where under, let's see, her young daughter came and when she was working late at night, daughter would come in and play with the lunar lander simulator. And her daughter crashed the program on it.
Right.
And so Margaret pointed it out to the supervisors and said, this is a serious problem if the astronauts punch in the wrong sequence. And they said, no, they're
Probably
highly...
having to use 7-year-old astronauts, right?
These are highly trained astronauts. They know not to punch in the wrong sequence.
Yeah.
So on Apollo 8,
Good luck with that idea.
on Apollo 8, they demonstrated the problem live, talking back to home, and what do we do? The computer crashed and all that. And so they fixed it.
Little red button in the corner.
Yeah, well, yeah, but that took like 2 hours, I think, to recover.
Back in those days, I bet it.
Yeah, so when Apollo 11 was landing, they had fixed the problem, so when the computer crashed, it recovered. The problem, and yeah.
So when it crashed, it recovered?
Yes, which it's better for the computer to recover when it crashes than for it to,
Not recover when
Not
it crashes.
recover.
Even better not crash in the first place.
well, yeah, but the problem was, I think the problem they had on Apollo 11 was that it was accumulating data and it ran out of storage. And so the computer cleared out the unnecessary data and continued rather than just stopping.
Are you saying that there's been a problem in the past about systems running out of storage space?
And when you compare the size of the Apollo landing computer with...
Do you think that's still a problem today?
It might be.
They probably had 4K.
Because like, they pointed out that your cell phone is like 1,000,000 times the capacity of the landing
Right, but we
computer.
have these things called modern software developers, and they think that they have
Oh, yeah.
all the space in the entire universe.
Well, they were saying that in 1987 on a project I was working on. In
But
87.
when you're dealing with big data, AKA data you can't physically move, it's so big.
Mhm.
It's just hilarious to watch the modern developers.
Bob,
Yeah.
take care of everything. I hear that all the time.
What?
We don't have to worry about storage. We got the cloud. I'm like, what do you think's powering the cloud?
The cloud is somebody else's computer.
I know.
Mhm.
It's a machine, a multiprocessor.
And speed, we have no problem with speed. We can push it all over the
So
place.
Stan, does anybody have any questions? What did you break this week, Stan?
Lee,
Oh, if you broke something, you can go first.
I broke everything this week.
Did you fix it?
No, not yet.
Okay.
My printer's down.
It'll be a presentation.
No, I just got to go in the other room and reload everything.
Well, why don't you bring it in when you troubleshoot it next time?
Yeah. Bring it in tomorrow night. Mhm.
Yeah, we have a question over there.
Where are the videos that you guys are recording available?
We're hiding them.
They're at Don's house.
They're in the cloud. Can you give the address?
I uploaded all the videos I took straight to YouTube.
Yeah.
And
So-
it's been more than a year since Don has had access to upload them.
I did upload some videos to YouTube.
Where do you upload them to?
Slack or the Sloop channel. The Sloop channel.
Let's upload a bunch and
That's
publish it.
too much technology for me. I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Just go to YouTube.
What's-
type in
what's
FLUUG.
It's not where it's right next to the cat videos.
Oh!
Well, if he had any choice, it would be right next to the cat videos, that's for sure.
Well, that's where it is anyway.
Yeah,
Is it?
alphabetically.
It's on the to-do list where,
So okay, if you scroll to the top and you hit the menu thing on the,
That's still broken.
Well, you can scroll to the bottom and get another copy of it.
Well, that's true.
So scroll to the bottom.
YouTube, oh,
Scroll to the bottom. Oh, wow, that one works. That's
We'll
different.
find out in a second if it worked. Ah, there you go.
see, we got 6 months ago.
Mhm. And 2 years ago.
Hey, guys, pay attention. Instead of rename that file, put the date in front of it.
hey, Stan,
Good call.
look at when I stopped doing it.
I know. Hey, it's a volunteer group. Does anybody here like to hold up their hand and volunteer to do some of this stuff? Hello?
We'll be happy to have you.
Yeah, we're happy to have
So
extra
you
volunteers.
have a YouTube channel.
Yes.
I guess we do. I had no idea.
Well, there it is.
And one of my tasks
Nobody
is
told me.
one of my tasks is to share the login
And
information.
they did tell me I do too much stuff now. You know?
So, if one volunteered to upload the videos to the channel, where do they get the videos to upload?
You'd have to get them from Don. We're not sure how that process works.
And Stan.
And Stan, I've got a camera now too, so
Mhm.
So is that feasible?
I suppose it is. Nobody's ever asked me
To
for
put
it.
them up there.
All right.
Yay, volunteer!
Now, Stan, do we know who he is?
He's on the list. He's the last guy on the list.
Well, you better put a couple stars around it.
I will.
I just want the videos.
We have an SD card with tonight's video on it. Does it have other stuff too?
Hmm?
If we have an SD card, he could stick it in his computer and
I guess.
copy stuff
It's all
out.
magic. It's beyond me.
Mhm.
It's actually very, very simple. You log into YouTube and you hit the upload button
Mhm.
and you upload it.
Yeah,
But
but
you
And
have
then
to
you
have the video to
And then you
upload.
spend a whopping 5 minutes naming it properly.
Oh, 2 cat videos.
yeah, but how do you attach it to the Sleuth channel?
Lots of hits.
Sorry?
How do you attach it to the Sleuth channel?
There are like 5 administrators right now, so.
We can make another one.
Who's the administrator?
I gave it to Chuck. Let's see if Chuck locked everybody out or not. I bet he did.
I don't know if he's ever used it.
All magic. I don't
Has
know.
Don got an
We
administrator?
have a lot of disconnects. You know, it's just whatever.
I have a technical question.
Uh-oh. I suppose you want a technical answer.
That might help.
Okay.
It might be for Andrew, since he
Hi.
has mentioned it already. Is there a simple, well-known way to connect a Linux machine to an Azure VPN?
You want to create the private networking or?
No, I want to connect to an existing Azure VPN.
You want to connect a Linux machine
Right.
to the Azure, which protocol, like IPsec?
Well, that'd be, yeah, whatever, I mean, whatever, I can't
That's part of
find
the
it.
question, isn't it?
That's part of the question. What's the simplest way?
I haven't touched that stuff lately with Azure.
I don't think anything's changed in 10 years. So.
No, in the last 5 years, we finally convinced them to enable ICMP. So yeah, they're slowly coming up to speed. But yeah, it depends. If it's IPsec, then you do need a static reserved IPv4, or you need to go IPv6 because IPsec is standard. And then your VPN will just be automatic. But if they are using a variation of their PPTP Microsoft thing,
Or I think that I've seen P2P or something like that.
yeah, but it's just basically, it's a little bit more proprietary, but it's basically point-to-point tunneling.
Right.
It's dial-up tunneling technology from the 1980s that Microsoft uses. And it's just a different style of VPN.
Is there a client I can use on the Linux side?
Oh yeah. If you look in any of your distros, you'll probably, just do like a package search for PP, and you'll probably find different variations of the clients.
Look for what?
Just PP.
PP, Peter Paul?
Yeah, because you have,
P2P or PP?
yeah, that's the thing, is that it's PPTP, point-to-point tunneling protocol. Yeah, and it's just all kinds of variations.
Okay, Don, point the camera to the front.
Okay.
Don't turn away from the front. I've got some questions for the audience, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot. There's some faces here that I'm not that real familiar with. I believe I've seen you here before, sir.
Right. I've
Okay.
been here before.
Yeah, and I forget, how did you find out about our group?
I get an email every month.
Okay, well, it's close enough.
So they support OpenVPN, the PPTP something. IKEv2 is a variation on IPsec. So
Is that information in their UI or is it external?
I'm at docs.microsoft.com.
And you search for P2P?
I just search for what their VPN gateway handles.
Okay.
And they've got some various protocols, and instead of PP, they're now calling it SS for site to site.
But you listed OpenVPN. Will they support OpenVPN?
It says they do, yes. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be fun or easy.
Right.
They say they do.
Because I've done multiple searches, and when I search for Azure, Linux, OpenVPN, the only thing I get is build a VM in Linux. More. Okay.
A lot of people are using, like, they'll get a free credit for Azure, and then they'll spin up nodes in Ireland so that they can get watch European TV channels. So that is the VPN. That's the problem with your search, is you're searching for VPN in Azure, and you're getting all the people using it as a proxy. What you might want to do is search for like a VPN gateway or VPN site, actually the site to site, or the enterprise VPN. Search for enterprise VPN Azure, and then open VPN, and that'll probably narrow you into the area you're going.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. I didn't realize the question was not yet answered completely. Thank you. Young lady. No, Don, don't put her on the spot.
So, okay.
How did you find out about this group, this meeting tonight?
Meetup.
I don't like Meetup, but I have to maintain it.
Well, the website's not searchable, so the robots don't really find it.
Okay.
Can I tell you my broken story?
Sure.
Due to layoffs at the large corporate empire that I work for, I got a Linux box, and 2 weeks ago, I took down our main application and locked 10,000 international users out of our system.
Sweet. That's a feature.
Thank you. But I wish my boss was as enthusiastic. Yeah.
You rule
Because
the world now.
unfortunately, we're running Microsoft products on it, which suck.
Oh, God.
So what this proves, though, is that you have actual users who are actively using
Well,
this,
that's
correct?
true. That's true.
The bright side.
They missed us while we were down. And I heard you guys, we're going from the SVN repository to Git, so I want to learn a lot about it.
That's why I was interested in that Atlassian thing that we're using.
I would not go to Atlassian for any Git knowledge whatsoever.
Where's the best place to go?
Well, this really great place called kernel.org, they have this little sub-site called Git, wiki, git-scm.org. And it is literally the source code documentation for how to use it, with lots of wonderful examples.
So Atlassian stuff, at least the stuff we have sucks.
Yeah, Atlassian likes to craft their own little universe, and so if you try to use generic knowledge, you hit these brick walls where it works special in their environment. When Atlassian's running.
You say git-scm.com?
Super Lee has a computer with a browser, and if you just, I don't know, go for like git-scm or something like
Is
that.
it .org or .com?
.com.
Yeah,
I think it's already got it up. I remember looked at it before, but it looks like it's got examples of it.
Well, there's a documentation right in the middle of the screen.
And there's actually, I think it's basically a one-line book.
But one of the issues in Git that a lot of people are not aware of is that every install of Git comes with a built-in SVN and CDS server, both client and server. So you can actually use Git to interface with older proprietary systems or older systems that you're trying to work with.
I'm sure that the people that configured it made it as difficult to use as possible.
No, what I'm trying to say though is that if you're using Git on your personal laptop or your personal computer, you can also use it to interface with the legacy SVN system at the same time and be more awesome in your own little hidden awesome laptop world. So you don't have to worry about like the Atlassian tools because it's totally distributed.
GitHub.
Next person. I think you've been here, what, once before?
A couple times.
A couple times?
Yeah, last month and then several months before that.
And I didn't get a chance to ask you how you found out about our group.
Meetup.com also.
Okay. Well, okay, 2 out of nothing.
That's like the third we've had. Great.
Yay! And I know you, so that's good. All right, thank you. Oh, guess, do we need a call for help? Anybody got a problem they need, other than Lee?
Yeah, I can make problems.
Okay,
I can
go
make
ahead.
problems. No, this is, I have one information. How many people have ever used a commercial NAS rather than a home-built NAS?
Are you talking about a SAN?
No, I think it's listed as an NAS. I wish I could remember the name of the vendor. But
Oh, how many have used the commercial one?
yeah, I mean, an off-the-shelf NAS.
You mean like Synology?
Yeah,
or-
Synology, that's the word,
Okay.
Synology.
Yeah, they are all open source projects, hidden underneath a rebranded logo.
And Synology doesn't like it if you mess around with the wrong things.
Wait, when
What
we
does
say
that- okay, so-
NAS, are we talking storage solutions?
Network attached
Storage
storage.
Okay,
solutions, right.
because the Big Blue has some too, so.
So the Synology one, the one that we've kind of focused on, what did you say, that it doesn't like it if you do what?
Well, okay, I was trying to turn on the web services the way I have it on my Macintosh. And that was a little bit, on the Mac it's, you can, you turn on web service and allow permission to browse to a tree structure, and you can have a directory listing and click on a file and play a video or listen to audio. And Synology doesn't have it set up that way. And
It only wants to do file sharing. It doesn't want to act as a web server.
it does want to act as a web server, but you have to figure out how to do it within their structure. And part of it is you can't do it at the system level, you have to do it at the user level. And I did it at the system level, so I had to call up tech
So
support
the
so they could help me
useless
rebuild it.
one-page description of it says that it is compatible with Windows, Mac, and Linux.
Right.
My question is, okay, so it can speak all three of those different file systems, but can it set up a single share that all three of those clients can get to?
Yes.
Sure. So you have various protocols. So you can have NFS on some of them, you can have SMBs, Canvas zips, but you can also set up other fun things like WebDAV.
iTunes.
What do you think would be a good common server protocol that all three clients could get to?
So you want to have a shared file that three people access at any given time?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it depends on their stack, but you might use something like Sandburg Sibs, or use a web interface like WebDAV or some other protocol.
Or SSHFS.
Yes, SHFS.
Or that one, okay.
But if you have a NAS and you want virtualization, most of them will support iSCSI now.
Yeah. Yeah. We can even do that. We can even do
Well, iSCSI is more point-to-point, it's not meant for sharing.
Right, I mean, it shares it out to some other server that is then sharing with all of its clients.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a million ways to do it wrong, okay?
There's one way to do it, and some of them are wrong.
Sounds like it's an okay thing to. Have you ever, they wanted to buy small disks first, and I said, no, buy big disks.
Buy big disks.
Because it's how much, after you made the mistake of buying small disks, and now you want to retrofit it with big disks.
No.
It's a pain.
So you have to do only one particular thing, is you need to buy each of your disks from a different vendor.
Each one of them for a different
So
vendor.
well, for example, if you have a 5-disk array,
Yeah.
try to at least get 2 vendors. And that way, if you get a bad pallet, you're only taking half the risk.
The thing is, they'll have the same failure time. Different disks in the same batch are likely to have very close to the same failure time.
So I used to do the NASDAQ and all those ticker storage systems, and we just had these pallets of disks, and you had to go, even if they were from the same vendor, you had to mix them from pallets because of the risk of the bad gas in this section of the drive.
Keep the M2EFs spread out.
Yeah, get different batch numbers.
Actually makes a lot of sense.
Well,
But that's good to know, but that didn't answer my question of buying small disks and upgrading to large disks later.
So the benefit is if you buy all small disks now, and then they go to upgrade later, then you get to take the small disk home with you.
Oh, yes, that's a good idea.
I thought it was that way.
And how do you upgrade to the large disks later? Do you all at once, or do you?
Synology and some other tools will let you basically start putting larger disks in.
And then once all of them are large, you can grow the underlying logical volume manager or whatever they're using to stitch the disks
But
together.
They do have fairly good instructions on
if you want something more automagic, I would stick with like a Drobo on like a USB-C connection, and then that's much more bulletproof and future-proof. Drobo.
Drobo is what, instead of Synology to communicate?
USB-C plugged in. What do you plug the USB-C into?
A box or anything you want to, a router or whatever you want to do. But the thing is that Drobo software is very, it will auto-heal itself, but it also, if you keep that interfaces like a USB, or if you do an iSCSI block device to something that's doing the sharing, then you're more future-proof than Synology's, oh, we're not supporting that anymore.
Is the Synology going to want to act as its own? Are you going to create user accounts on it, or is it going to authenticate against the user accounts that are already on your domain?
You can attach any of them to LDAP or any of them to some other, authentication protocols.
Or elect as its own?
Yeah, some models, some of the higher end models will act as like a domain controller or a tree in the forest.
But on the low end models, you create accounts on it and then you log into that account.
I think I know enough.
Okay. I think we should take a break now, and then so we can go on to our main presentation. Everybody, 5-10 minutes at most. Just take a break. We'll go away. Restrooms are down the hall. There's a water fountain out there. There's a snack bar thingy here. And Val brought in all kinds of really great little chicken pieces. See you back in. Lee, you ready to start?
Yeah, let's get started. I want time to run through the slides and allow enough time for questions.
Okay. We're going to start now?
Yeah. All right, folks. The question has been raised multiple times over the last few months. I want to learn more about it. I'm sure everybody can spell it. It's up there on the screen. But the question is, how do you use it? Well, a lot of people, like Andrew, use it day in and day out on hundreds of different projects. We're not talking about that level of expertise. We're talking about somebody backing up their Etsy directory, tracking changes. Okay, and that's the first point tonight, and then we'll get into some extra topics here in a little bit. Git was invented late 80s, I guess, Dan? Or Andrew?
Sorry?
Git?
2003 or 4?
Late 80s sounds a little early.
Yeah. No, if you mean version control system, then late 80s.
Well, early, well, anyway. It's been around for a long time. I don't know that much about the history. It was the system that Linus standardized when he started working on the kernel, right?
No. The kernel started on CVS.
Oh, it did? Okay.
It moved over to a system called, we're gone now.
RCS?
No, it was Bitbucket or something stupid. Not Bitbucket, it was something else. Proprietary protocol.
Okay.
Open source people wrote a client for the proprietary protocol. The company that owns the proprietary protocol got in his fit.
Source integrity by most current systems.
Yeah, it was a silly history, but Linus got upset that this was even a problem, and he wrote Git in a week.
Yeah. Well, the initial version, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once it was released into the community, people started using it. Its first biggest use was the kernel, because that's what it was written for. And people started adopting it for everything else because it was very clean, it was well designed, it was designed for teams. It is a distributed system. All right, where's my pointer? Distributed from the standpoint that it is designed to be able to have hundreds of people working on a project, managing code they check in, which is great. But again, we're talking about the simpler use cases. As a system, it is much more capable than previous incarnations. Some of the commercial ones cause major problems. It is a lot better than CVS, SVN, et al. primarily from a distributed standpoint, but there's a lot of other advantages internally. We mentioned the Linux kernel being one of the biggest projects that started. At this point today, it is adopted worldwide for millions of projects. If only certain large companies that start with an M would only adopt it also, everybody's world would be a lot better.
They want GitHub, they figured they check the box.
Now, I guess,
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
a few years back, Subversion was still the biggest player in the field, but I believe that pie has shifted significantly to where Git's
Well,
dogs.
so the pie chart on that is still very interesting because you do have RCS and CVS and all these things still sucking up part of the pie.
Right.
So,
nobody's got 51%.
but yeah, but it's also, this other thing is that what is active. So if you're talking about open source world, near 100% do. If you're talking about proprietary Java developers from the 90s, who knows?
Well, I mean, but like several years back, probably 5 or 6 ago, I was looking at that, and Subversion was probably at that slightly more than 50%. And Git was 20-ish, give or take.
Well, but
And they have opened up their slice of the pie significantly, taking it mostly from Subversion.
yeah, well, I mean, in the open source community, it rules the roost. But when you include other commercial implementations and things, then the pie gets smaller. But who cares about that crap?
Right.
So the bottom line for our discussion here is it's great for a lot of different things, but for our purposes, a lot of people said, how do I use it? So I'm going to focus on how do I do it, how do I manage files on my machine, and how to save them somewhere so that I can get them later, or so I can restore it from a backup. The basic concept in Git is there's a repository, also known as a repo. That repository is used to store everything that you check in to the repository. Buzzwords: repository, check in, check out, or commit is another term for check in. We're going to talk about all that. On your local system, this repository is stored in a .git directory in the directory where you created it. Now, so some of the machines in the shop, I create the repository in the root of the system. I add the directories I want to make sure I can replicate, like etc and /u, which is what I standardize on for user files, sometimes /srv, sometimes /op, whatever. But the point is there is always a .git directory somewhere on the system that is the root of the repository. Everybody comfortable with that?
So,
yeah.
do you use like different repositories on the same machine, like an Etsy repository, like you have in your example, of maybe an ops, this app?
You can, but it can get messy.
Okay.
You can have a repository under a repository, but believe me, I tried that a couple times and I threw it out. Because once you try to do git status and do versions, I don't remember exactly where it broke, but I threw it away. That's when I moved my repository to the root of that pie, or whatever system I'm backing up. And I just add a directory for Etsy, and then for each directory I want to track.
So if you have like an Etsy and an op, if there's humans involved, don't do it that way. But if you have automation controlling that Git, that can work. But yeah, whenever you have humans on the box and you have multiple Git things in different layers or different levels,
doing Git things.
yeah,
Right.
you can get into trouble.
Right,
So
it would be, I guess I was thinking of like completely disjoint directories.
correct. So like if you have like /op/myapp, of course that can be a Git repository of some sort if we like it too. But if you have something in root, something in Etsy, and then something else in home, you can get yourself into a little bit of a predicament where you don't know where you are at the moment. You will feel like Stan all day long.
Isn't some of that going to depend on the size of those partitions?
No.
If you run out of storage space, one of the not issue, but one of the facets of Git is you always have a local copy of the repository branch you're working on.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like you said, if you make a slash git, then aren't all the backups for Etsy and Homewood are all going to end up on the slash partition?
Correct.
Yeah, and the slash, and so you or home may be kind of large, and so when all of their changes end up on slash.
That's a good point.
The bottom part of this is going to talk about some of that structure.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody's comfortable with that. A repository is basically a file structure under .git directory in the home directory where you create a repository.
And you should only have one of them.
You should. If you have two totally separate projects, fine. But remember, they're separate. And you can never reference one from the other, otherwise you're going to get yourself in trouble. If you want to back up a project, that's fine. If you want to back up a system, like I get into once in a while, then you need to be really careful about it, and that's why I do it in the root directory.
Or should you make your .git a separate mount point and put a whole file system on it that you can manage the disk space of separately?
No. Stanford, you're thinking 20-year-old technology when storage costs money.
Well, and
So let's continue on
Yeah,
with this,
yeah.
and maybe some questions will be
he
answered.
he may answer without us having to
Okay.
beat it out.
All right, so the repository, again, is stored in that directory. And I'm going to show you an example here in Etsy, although I did make a copy of it, so I can just throw it away when we're done. So if I did a git init in the Etsy directory, you would see a .git directory under the home directory of that repo. At that point, assuming we create a repo in Etsy, we want to manage all the files in Etsy, Git will automatically track all the files in that directory to start with. Well, what if you don't want some files? What if you want to ignore a tilde file, a vim backup? What if you want to ignore a .dist, which is a standard I use for a file that is the original config file on the system? I remember copy it, rename it, copy it as dist, and then I can delete all the comments out of it to make it a lot easier to read. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the second most important thing after you create the repo is the ignore file. .git ignore. Okay, so we've covered three concepts already. Repository. Initializing a repository, again, I'll show you an example in a minute. It creates a .git directory where you initialize the repository. And then the .git ignore, which is how you manage things you want to ignore or not ignore. Okay, everybody comfortable so far? In fact, if I can get over here, I have a copy of my Etsy directory here. It's under my home directory, home LVL Etsy.
I'm not used to seeing an Etsy in my home directory.
Well, I made a copy so I can throw it away, Stanford. I
got it.
don't want to risk mangling anything that's live on the system.
I'm with you now, just for demonstration purposes.
Right. And let's see, where is it? Let's do a pattern for it.
CREO.
That would help.
I've tried to use that command as well.
Was that test?
Real?
Yep.
It sounds a lot for you.
I had one guy who got there before I did. He aliased the misspelling of every command he could think of. More, mro, grio.
Oh, good grief.
I thought about it.
Wow.
Okay, so I have created a repository. Under this .git file are a bunch of folders. This is a Git repository. It is also called a working directory, where the repository is. This means that this is where you have files, you're looking at them, you're checking them in. I can do a git log. I'm on branch master. With branches is something we may get to later if we have time. But basically, one of the fundamental concepts is Git. In Git is that you can have a branch that is a logical connection, a logical collection of files for a particular version of that repository. Whether it's 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, whatever. You know, you can create a branch. All your files are in the branch. You change them. You can check out a different branch, have a totally different set of files. Again, that's kind of an advanced concept, but that's one of the things you're going to see. Contrast this with a bare repository. It's called bare. If you did an int minus bare, that is a repository you use to save things. And we'll get that here in a little bit. All right, questions? I don't want to leave anybody behind because we'll be adding to it here pretty quick. Got your hand on it?
No, it's great.
Okay. If I don't see you, just speak up. So Git is going to automatically track the files under that repository. And we'll talk about Git ignore here in a few minutes. When you add files to the repository and commit them, Git will automatically track them in perpetuity. If you change a file, you can see the change. You can see that it has changed again. We'll get to this here in more detail. But the whole point is, once you add a file to the repository, Git will just keep tracking it forever, unless you do something to break that tracking.
How often will it make a version?
Anytime you change it.
Anytime you, all right, change it in editor and then save.
Right, anytime you change it and then add it to the files to commit, and then commit those changes.
Okay, so I have to take a separate action to get it.
To save, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're working in your working directory. Is there actually something you have to do to commit it up to Git?
Yeah, that's a later concept.
Yeah, we're coming up right now. We're
Okay,
just
one other question. He's got the file in his working directory, and I got the file in my working directory. He changes his, I change mine. How does that get rectified?
That's a merge, and we'll probably get to that later.
I don't know if we have time.
Okay.
Okay, but you can take care of it.
Oh, yeah.
It's included.
Okay.
If nothing else, Git will tell you there is a difference in the files, and you can see it. And at that point, you can either say, oh, that's okay, merge them, and you're good. Otherwise, you can change one of the files and commit it separately.
Okay.
All right, so we've got a repository. We looked at it. We've created it. In that repository, we can look at versions. Let's go back for a second here. If I do a git status, sorry about the colors out there, but that's basically saying these files are all in the current directory, and they're red because they are not in the repository. Does that make sense?
Can you scroll to the header up top?
Yeah, I mean, how did you
There's an actual header that just says.
you created a repository, but you didn't commit these files to the repository.
I haven't added them.
Added them.
Added them. Okay, I did a git status on branch master. Again, branch is kind of an advanced concept. We may get to that. We may have time. If not, we can maybe come back for a second.
So you put a copy there, but you didn't tell Git it needed to track it?
No, I initialized the repository in the directory, and that's all I've done.
Okay.
And if I do a git status,
Because it doesn't know by default what you want in that.
right.
It just made it repository.
Or it's polite enough to not add everything the first run.
Right.
To give you the chance.
So if you're going to have
do
to add
what
them
you
one
really
by
want.
one, why do you need a git ignore list?
Well, you don't have to add things one by one. You don't have to use git ignore. But for the purpose of system administration and Lee's particular talk, this is going to make a lot of sense in a minute.
So you could add a whole, these are files, but you could add a whole. subdirectory and then go and ignore certain
Yeah, you
files.
type git
He's
add
gonna show you,
asterisk
watch
to
what
get
it's
everything.
taking right there.
I can do a git add star, and everything's in the repository.
But you probably won't start out conf, for example.
Or, that's a possibility. But I probably wouldn't do it here, I do that in my git ignore file.
What about
And we're gonna get to
wildcarding?
building that here in a minute.
Yeah.
Can you do wildcarding, like say
Yeah,
X asterisk?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I git add star. I add everything in the current
Some
directory.
products you can do star but not say letters on a star. Like if I only wanted to commit the X's, some products won't let you say X asterisk. So
Yeah.
that's my question.
Yeah. And again, we'll get to that here in a little bit.
Okay.
All right, so everybody understands, I have a repository, I have a .git directory for the repository. If I do a status, it shows me a couple hundred files are not in the repository, they're red. If I wanted to, I could do a git add star at this point and throw everything in the repository. Think about it for a second.
Well, the one thing I would add here is that if you were used to using CVS or Subversion, Git actually has helpful messages whenever you ask for the status.
Right, that was.
And whenever you're in a lot of the historical tools, it was like, hey, what's going on? We can't tell you. What's going on? We can't tell you. Well, Git is kind of helpful because it's helpful for these things called users.
Untracked files, and the hint here, git add
So we don't need us to users.
Yeah.
to include what will be committed.
Yeah, that was worth $1 million right there, just saying, if you did this command, it would, fix it. Then it's fairly intuitive, like I said, I just want all the configuration files, so
Yep.
git add start.
Yep. Okay, everybody good so far?
And do you happen to say git add file 1, git add file 2? Oh, I just want star. Star won't add a second copy of file 1 and file 2. Yeah.
Correct. If I do a git add star, it will add every file. Then they will be staged, which is something that is ready to commit, but you haven't committed it yet. At that point, you can look at what's ready to commit and adjust it if you need to. Okay, but I'm not going to do git add star. I'm going to be a little more specific about it. That work? Okay, so when I'm using this repository, if I commit a file, it will be committed to the repository. Now, a commit is remember, commit's a two-step process. You have to add a file, and then you have to commit it. Because once you add a file, you can look back and say, okay, these files are ready to commit. They're staged. That's probably the simplest way to think of it. You can add something without committing it. You can and then you can throw it. You can throw that away from the stage you want and not commit it if you want to. Yeah.
When you do add, does it just keep it on your local drive and not put it up there?
Correct.
Until you stage it?
Putting it somewhere else is what we'll get to toward the end. Once you have committed a file, then you can see it in the repository. If you do a git status and that file hasn't changed, you won't see anything. If you change it, it'll give you a status that says this file has changed. If you want to add, you can then add those changes to the stage, and then you can commit them.
You don't just recommit it, you have to add the changes and then commit them? You
Right.
don't just recommit the file?
Well, you can do a git commit minus A if everything is clean and you're ready to do it.
Okay, go on.
Yeah. There's always a shortcut.
Which was
Yes, go ahead.
Used to Subversion, that was one thing that you used to do. Is in Subversion, just do commit. Here you have to add it to the commit queue, basically.
Right.
And then you commit it. So you've
Right.
got a checkpoint.
Yeah, Git actually calls it a stage. A stage is, this is ready to commit, but you haven't committed it yet.
Yeah,
Does that commit queue, so to speak?
Stage.
Stage. All right, does that, if I sign off the computer and I come back, will that still exist?
Correct, because that is actually added to the repository, but it hasn't been saved yet.
Okay.
Once you stage 10 files, I come back a week later, it'll say the same 10 files are still staged.
And they will not have changed.
Correct.
What if you put some on the commit stage, and then you want to go back and edit that file, do you have to take it off the stage?
No, you can just edit it and it will say, hey, this file's been changed. Then you would just re-add it.
Just re-add it.
Yeah. You know, the stage is there for you to verify what you want to commit before you do it, which is really good.
Yeah.
You know, because you can, well, oh, I missed a file, I can add it to stage. The logical reason to do that is when you go, once we get into it, I'll show you the log. The git log shows you what files were changed. And the best way to do that, believe me, is to group all files under a logical reason that you can put in the commit. So these files were changed to fix this problem with the SCSI driver. And then when you go back and look, these 10 files were changed. They're all supposed to be related to that problem, which gives you a history.
You put the ticket number in there.
Whatever. One of the big advantages to Git over time is that you can always look back at that file and see who did it and what they did. And if they set up the commits right, it makes it very easy to read. You know, these 10 files fixed this SCSI problem. You can go back 2 years from now, search, and look at the commits and say, okay, well 10 years ago, this Andrew made this change to fix this problem.
Well, and you can do it the other way too, is you can use git blame, and you can actually ask for the line in the file, who was the last person to edit it.
Right. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you pin stuff to go back to what the state was 2 years ago?
Yeah, yeah. Good technical terms, cherry picking on some, you can reverse a merge on a cherry pick. A lot of the terms get very funny.
Or do you mean something
This is
like
Linus
tags?
talking.
Well, no, he's talking about taking a very specific like line in a file back and so on.
Or do you mean taking a whole directory back?
No, I'm saying you got a bug from somebody that's got a version 2 years ago and you want to go back to their state.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You can do
time
that?
travel. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, remember I was talking about branches and versions?
Just branches and versions.
Yeah, I mean, if you're on branch 4, you can always check out branch 2 and test it.
Okay, so you actually have to do a version event to pin
No,
a version.
No.
you can go back via hash, which is a unique identifier to any point in time.
Right. I'll show you those in a few minutes, but
I take it that a hash is, if you create one, it marks every single thing in the repository.
every single thing in
It's a
that
snapshot of
commit.
that point in time.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can actually do this exact same thing with Subversion and CBS if you know how to use them.
Yeah, I never really got into those. I was using a commercial product in those days.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so what we're going to do tonight, and we've already started, we're going to initialize that repo in Etsy, which we already did. Then we're going to do a little bit of thinking. What do we want to actually save in the repository? Okay, we're going to start working on a git ignore. Then we're going to work on adding, changing, and reviewing. So let's get to it. What do we want to add in this repository? And how do we want to do it?
Everything that starts with B.
No, before that.
All the configuration files.
Which is?
Start on conf.
No. I mentioned it 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, well, you forgot it at breakfast, I forgot what you mentioned.
Okay.
The git ignore.
Oh shoot, hang on a second. Why is this off?
You're in insert
Insert
somewhere.
mode.
You're in VI and insert.
No,
You're in Vim, dude.
Yeah, you're in Vim.
no, I'm
insert.
trying to find the,
You're in less or more or something.
No.
Cubang, yeah. Little Cubang.
I'm trying to find the freaking left margin.
It's off
Not
the
there. It's
stage.
off. It's been missing all night.
Yeah, we haven't been able to see the left all night.
Do a colon C space number and you'll have, it'll move them in a little bit. Of course that works.
Yeah, this works, yeah. Then we just slide the screen over there.
Well, obviously this projector has a margin issue if I can get down here.
Margin of error. Or is it error?
There
or
we
margin?
go. There we go.
That's
There you
what
go.
it is.
Okay.
Gray bar technical support.
Mhm.
Oh, that looks more like.
What's the file name?
Get ignored.
Get attributes.
Say again?
Get ignored.
Right. Okay, now I'm in my get ignore file. Okay, first off, if I want to select specific files in the directory, I have to ignore everything else, right? So I'm going to start with a star. I'm going to ignore everything. Okay. Then I'm going to go in and not ignore.
What's that first, what's that leading character up there? I can't.
Bang.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I'm going to not ignore sysconfig. For example.
And not star.conf like I was begging for.
Okay.
Bang,
Bang
it.
it, though,
right?
Okay. So I'm going to not ignore the sysconfig directory and star.conf. Yes, Dan?
Can you put remarks in this file?
Sure.
Why didn't you just do an add on those patterns rather than adding the negative of those patterns to the ignore file?
Well, because now when you do get add, it'll follow the
Or you'll
rules
do
you
it,
set up here.
So I think
you'll
what-
do get add star and it'll go follow these rules.
So right now, if Lee backs out and shows us the git status, it will be entirely different.
Right. And as soon as he can get that editor to write the file.
Oh, wait,
It's
Mark,
going to be.
You're going to
don't you want to write the file,
W.
Lee? You want to write the file, don't you?
You're using an X instead of a W to write the file.
No.
WQ.
Can't
Oh, wait a
write.
minute.
Yeah, for some reason, it's not doing that.
WQ is crap.
Colon W.
No.
No.
Oh, because the permissions on your Etsy directory got replicated from the real Etsy directory.
Okay. Now what's my status going to look like?
It's going to be a little shorter.
Got a lot fewer files. Sorry about the red, but that's the color coding. You guys mind if I just turn them off?
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
There you go.
That was awesome.
Just take a look.
Are you going to be able to get back to your chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't stump your toe.
I can feel where I am. My toes are going to
Is
do.
that an X term?
Yeah.
Can you do a right mouse, control right mouse, reverse video?
Put that was right on the screen, I'm leaving.
Now that you got the lights off, it's okay.
Doesn't work. Okay, so now you got me screwed up. Control.
Never mind. Just scroll to the bottom. You
Okay. So what do I do next?
Would you like to add a singular file to show them how it looks?
I can do that. What should I add?
How about YP for yellowpages.com? Let's time travel here.
Okay, what's going to happen when I do git add yp.com?
It's going to ask you for a comment and a reason.
Nope.
No, I'm adding.
Oh, you're
not
adding.
committing.
Okay, you're not committing. You're adding.
I was going to say it's already there.
Will it?
What? Oh, sudo.
Now I have added yp.conf to the stage. and I still have a whole pile of files on here that haven't.
Oh, wasn't ip.conf already there? Why wasn't it there with the star conf?
It is.
So that was a get ignore. We started with an exclusionary practice
Oh.
first.
Okay. Now,
Oh.
Don, to answer your specific question,
Okay.
it was there in the list of untracked files.
Okay. You haven't added it. It's just the stuff that's not in the ignore, in the not ignore, is not listed in the status, while the things that are in the not ignore are shown in the status.
Right. If the file is ignored, when you do a status, you won't see anything.
But if it's not ignored,
Correct. You will see it either in the untracked, or as we saw at the top, yp.conf is now available to commit.
So what's the difference between adding it and commitment then?
Okay, adds it to the stage, because that's the term Git uses. The stage are those files that would be committed if you do a commit. You can play with the stage all day long. Now, normally it's no big deal, but you know, if you're making changes, you can always unstage it and go back to where you were. Get reset.
So the reason that you have the extra step is that you're truly distributed. So normally, you commit something and then you would push it up to the Subversion server or push it up to the CVS server or something like that, and that's your commit. But because you're completely distributed, so you're actually running your own Git server of a sorts on your local machine, you're adding a file, and then whenever you commit it, you're committing it to your local system, and then you can later, if you choose, push it out somewhere else. Yes, Stan?
Conversely, if you're not doing stuff distributed, you're only doing it for your own system,
Correct.
that's an interim stage where you're actually testing what you're doing to see before you commit to save it?
No. So whenever you run Git inside of a repository, inside of a directory, it's a repository. It can live forever. You can keep it there by itself. This is something Subversion can't do. This is something CVS can't do. So Git allows you to create a repository, manage its history without talking to another server.
Yeah, in one of his first slides, it said that Git was a distributed version control system.
Right.
Whereas Subversion, CVS are centralized. I think that's why there's not the extra stage. When you commit it, you go to the server. Here, the tracking and the revisioning is done locally.
Correct.
This stage is also really helpful for like tailoring commits. So if you have a file that you've made a whole bunch of changes to, and maybe you just forgot to commit it along the way, and maybe you were doing two separate things, you might want to commit those separate tasks as separate commits so that your Git log reads really well, and you have, that's kind of the best practice. In this case, it may not matter that much, but that's a big reason for the stage, is that you can stage part of the file. You can stage part of your changes and then commit just part of your changes as one commit, and then you can stage the rest of your changes, even if you did all the changes all at once.
Do you want to put the space YP conf at the end there? Just for demonstration?
Oh.
Well, I mean, although the commit's going to commit the only thing that's stayed.
Right.
Correct, but you could, and I'm not saying that we need to run it that way, I'm just saying is that you can commit a very specific file if you choose to.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, in this case, if I execute what's here, I will commit anything on the stage. Or if I want to commit a single file, as Andrew mentioned, if I spell it right.
Why, you still don't got
Getting
it.
close.
Hang on a second.
Need a flashlight?
No, I had to turn lights on my keyboard.
I think
now you're
without
missing
the
white space.
I think it's not going to like that.
Engage.
If I just do the commit, it'll commit anything on the stage, or I can pick a single file or multiple files and commit them. Okay, so if I do this,
You don't have your user set up.
I know. Git will tell me I haven't configured this repository with my identity.
Okay, so say you make some changes to Yellow Pages and you commit that, what does it look like? If you go back looking at it later to see your progress, try to figure out something that went wrong along the way, what does it look like?
Well, but first off, the reason that his environment's not set up is that sudo is making this go as root. So his user environment might be set up, but the root is not.
Yeah, since I'm using root. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute.
But yeah, she is.
But I committed that file. It tells me who committed it. This is the system username at hostname by default. Remember, I had the sudo to do this because I have a copy of Etsy which needs root permission to write in the directory. And that is a hash. That hash is guaranteed unique. It will always uniquely identify this commit at any point in time in this repository, of course. So
if every change I make, I'm going to have a new commit with a new unique.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Every time I make a change, I'm going to commit again, and I'm going to get a new unique code.
Right.
And
You're
that's
going to
what
get a
I'm
new
going
log
to use if
entry
I
with a
need
new
to go
hash.
back.
Correct.
That's going to be my handle I grab onto to get
Right.
back.
Well, yeah, and you can also do a numerical count off of heads. You can actually say, what did it look like 3 steps back from head or master? And so there's actually other features that make it a little bit more user-friendly, but always think about it as a hash.
Okay. Everybody with me? All right, where's my presentation?
Yeah. Your mouse is moving around, but you don't have focus.
There you go. Okay, so we have in Etsy here, we've created a repository. Any file that gets committed, as you saw with yp.conf, you will always be able to refer to that file or the set of files you've committed by that commit ID. At any point in time, you can check out that commit ID and have those exact files back. Now, it gets a lot trickier with which version you're on, which branch you're on. I don't want to go there, but the basic concept is that hash will always identify those files when they were committed. Is that fair, Andrew?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm thinking how our work is set up. Say you're doing a big release, you've got 20 modules you're going out, and there's 21, and you pick up all 21 by mistake. You want to discard that one module from being committed, but it's already in stage. How would you discard a staged module?
You can, the simplest way to think of it is you check out the previous commit and then throw away the commit you made. Is one way to do it.
I think you get revert in the file and remove.
so for
Yeah,
example,
it said something on there. It's like RM -- something. It tells you how to unstate something. I don't want to lose my edit changes.
But that's unstated. Go ahead.
so for example, if you want to undo the changes for one particular file, you can do a git checkout -- so you'll take it back to its previous state and then the file name. And that will take it back to its previous file state before you added it. So that's an option. You can unstage things, you can edit things, and they will fall out of the added state.
That's what I heard her ask. She wanted to unstage.
Yeah, okay.
So there's almost too many tools, and so that's sometimes the problem.
Yeah, and there are multiple ways, but I will tell you from experience, figure out what your problem is, drop it in your favorite search engine, and look for super user or Stack Exchange or one of the core wiki sites, and you will get 10 different ways to solve that problem. You know, the first time you see you're in detached head state, don't panic. Just look it up and backtrack and figure out what went wrong. Because there are thousands of good resources out there to learn to solve the problem in Git. Although it is complicated enough that I can recommend, don't try to learn it. Practice. Solve your problems during practice, because you'll be totally overwhelmed if you try to learn it up front.
Learn the specific parts you need right now.
Right, learn what you need right now, and then as you get to something you don't understand,
Then you
look for
learn
the
it.
resource on that particular issue. That make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so I showed you how to ignore cruft that is not important. That's what the git ignore is for. For example, you can git ignore everything and then don't ignore star.c or star.cpp, which means you will only see C files. In my case, when I'm backing up a Pi, I ignore everything. I unignore etc. I unignore user local nagios. I unignore user local nrdp, which are the physical directories that I want to keep in the repository. And in fact, I have been successful in restoring a Pi from a checkout, which was really cool. I actually tested it last month. You know, I put everything in the repository except, you know, proc and sys and things like that. I did a default install. I made sure it was the current version, Debian 9 updated. I blew it out on a micro SD for Debian 9 or that version of Raspbian. Did the initial config, added, you know, checked out the repository, rebooted, and I had my version, and it worked. It blew me away.
That's almost too easy.
Well, it wasn't that easy because
It
it took
easy
me a while
when
to
you
figure
start.
out what I could save and what I couldn't save.
Oh, yeah.
But the whole contents of var got me the database, got me packages, you know, all the user directories, got me the binaries, executables. There were a few things in opt I had to add, etc. of course, you know, home and root and that. But, you know, it worked, and that's how I replicate Pis nowadays.
So what you do? Did you include var and then exclude var log?
No, I just include everything in var.
So you're getting version controls of your log files?
No, this is a backup of a Pi.
Okay.
It is a pain in the butt to replicate a Pi because you have to start with a version micro SD, add packages and stuff like that, unless you want to try to do some sort of binary backup.
And you only have one storage slot to do it all in.
Right.
That's the part.
Our USB 2, which is a pain. And the network isn't much better. So Raspberry, the Pi 4s come out.
100 megabit network.
Yeah. Anyway, Stanford, the point I was making is, in this case, I could put everything in the Pi except for, you know, the system folders into a repository, start with the bootable system, check it out, and have a copy of the system I cloned, or into the system I checked into the repository. Now, that is a concept we're going to talk about in a few minutes. At this point, we have a repo that's backing up etc. But that doesn't do us much good unless we actually push that repo somewhere else to save it.
Right.
And that's the next concept. But look, I want to get past this here right now. We can show the file status at any time. And if this is what you want, like Stan, if you just want to back a copy of your etc, if you change a config file, you want to be able to go back to the previous version, you want to see the versions you've changed, the changes you've made in the past.
I want to be able to replicate it across different sheets.
Okay, well that's step 2. Step 1 here lets you track that etc directory. All right, so let's talk about the backups. I think I have some points in the meantime here. You saw the issue with global username. Until you configure it, Git will complain, hey, you need to set your username, you need to set your email. One of the nice things about Git is if it doesn't like something the way you have it set up, they'll complain about it. And you can either fix it or ignore it, that's up to you.
I'm a little bit confused there. One says user dot name and the other one says user space email.
I think it's user.email.
It should, on that
Yeah,
last,
that should be, I think you're right, they should be user.email.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't show it there.
I mean, you admit that that's probably a typo.
Yeah, it should be
I'll let it
user.email.
be experimentation.
Because it's user.name there and it should be user.email here. All right, everybody with me? One issue that gave me headache in the past is sometimes I'm doing this on a Pi. I have multiple people going in there and working on it. And they commit their own changes. It's not distributed. You know, in this case, we have multiple users on the same machine as the same user.
Because they're all coming in as the root user, as the Pi user.
Well, or whatever user we're using. It's usually OmniAdmin,
Yeah.
which is our standard user. Now, I just want to bring this up because if you have a situation like that, one of the things I started doing years ago was when you commit, when you save a commit, when you do a commit, you create a comment. I showed you that before. I like to put my initial in front of it, LVL colon, whatever the comment is. If Don's working on it, DEE colon, whatever the comment is. That way, if we happen to be working on the same system in the same repository, you always know who did it. In that case, the global email config isn't as important as knowing individually by commit who did it. Because the global identification would be Omnitech and admin at omnitech.net or knock at omnitech.net, a company user. But if we have a couple people working on a repository, and I just didn't have it. I put my initials up front. That way, if I'm the only one on a repository, it's immaterial. But if we happen to have two people making commits on the same machine, we can keep track of them. Does that make sense?
Just FYI, the commit command takes an author flag, and you can override the author that Git tracks.
Yeah, but you have to do that by commit.
Yeah, you can also change it for a specific repository.
But you can't change it for the user.
Well, you can create an alias, so each user would have their own alias with that auto-populated.
Yeah. I just use initials as 4 keystrokes. Anyway, it's not a big problem, but if you're in that situation, hopefully you'll remember mentioning it. All right, step 1, we created the directory, git init. We saw the directory, ls-al.git. Git status, we saw. We talked about git ignore. We set the ignore file, ignore directory.
I just kicked your chair.
Oh, that's fine. I don't mind. Didn't hurt.
Okay.
Okay, we talked about most of those. Now, what would git add dot do?
Files with single character names.
No.
That would be git add question mark.
Git add what?
It's almost like git add star, but it's different.
One character.
No.
No, it dots the current directory. Star matches everything in the current directory except the dot files in the current directory. Dot matches everything in the current directory. It doesn't match, it lists the whole and contents of the current directory.
Okay, so what did it do?
Didn't we already have some of those? Because
They weren't staged. They're now staged.
New to the stage.
Right, I have added those files to the stage.
It's like I said, it's very similar to saying get add asterisks.
Right.
But the difference is that get add asterisks will only match the non-hidden file names.
Well, everything only matches the non-hidden file names, the non-ignored file names.
No, I don't mean ignored. I mean that when you say, if you say ls asterisk or ls dot, the difference is that ls asterisk is only going to match the ASCII file names. ls dot is going to list all of the dot hidden file names.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so were there any hidden files?
There aren't any hidden files at the top level of Etsy.
Well, there shouldn't be.
Usually, dot get, I mean,
Files, okay.
dot get and dot get ignore.
Yeah, okay, because is dot get ignore in that list?
Or is it smart enough to always exclude itself and its sister?
No, dot get hasn't changed. I'm sorry, dot get ignore has not changed.
Well, neither did these other ones change. It's just that it knows not to manage its own, like that there, gets that.
What's that mean?
Nothing to commit.
Okay.
Those darn helpful messages.
So it's got a copy of that on branch master, and you haven't changed it yet since then.
But it technically doesn't have a copy. It has the hash that's reported that it hasn't changed.
Well, but those other ones hadn't changed either. I am a little bit, now you guys have got me answering that question. Why is dot get ignore not listed as a new file?
Because he committed it earlier.
No, he committed yp.conf. He's never committed .get ignore. I mean, is .get ignore a special file? That,
Oh,
Yeah. It's ignored.
oh, is ignore? It was in the ignore was in the ignore list.
I ignored everything.
Oh, you ignored everything, and then you unignored star.conf, and so when you said dot, it went through it, but it applied all the rules.
Correct. Dot is not a physical directory. That is a listing that honors the rules you have provided in .get ignore.
Oh, wait, okay. Dot is not the current directory. It's a special character that means go look at the rules.
No, dot is the current directory of Git. And when you're asking Git for the listing, it will apply the rules you have provided.
Makes perfectly good sense.
So now, if I want to add it,
Be in there somewhere.
It's at the top.
there it is right at the top.
You didn't confuse me. I mean, the difference between
We
asterisk
got
and
you
dot.
this time.
Cat out the ignore file, please. The dot ignore file.
Ignored. You know, that's an interesting thing. Ignore star. See, that's a little bit.
Well, ignore everything, but then add in just what you want.
But in other words, in this context, ignore star also means ignore dot star, which the bash command line interpreter interprets differently. Star does not match dot star.
Okay.
But in this context, star matches.
Because
Dot
this is,
star.
because this is not bash.
It's a different pattern matcher. Yeah.
Right. This
Okay.
is not bash.
He's like that all the time.
Keep us honest.
All right, so if we want to add a specific file again, password, well, that matches my ignore.
Those darn helpful messages.
Where's P?
There it is.
password right there.
Now that added it, but it did not commit.
Correct.
Right.
These are in the, if it had been committed, that means there have been no changes since it was last committed. It would not show and get status.
So YP won't be at the bottom.
Right. Because it's already been committed. What happens if I look at a status on YP.com?
Nothing is clean. Squeaky clean.
Now, this can be ambiguous because, let's say, YP.conf is in the repository, shadow isn't, because I haven't added it. Okay, this got me for a long time before I realized that Git was just being proper.
Right, but because you're starting with an exclusionary process, it's
Right.
just, it's acting different. If you were doing it with an inclusion process, it would actually work as desired.
The way to verify if it's in a repository or not, I've learned to use is git log, not git status. Git status only shows you the current stage, ready to commit, and files that are not excluded.
If you wanted to see all the files, you could say git ls-files.
Well,
I'll show you every file that Git is tracking, if that's good. But yeah, git log's easy too. Git ls-files. Those are showing up because they're staged.
yeah, so that's showing everything in the everything that is not ignored. Because we still have a bunch of stuff on the stage, but yet this stuff is also in ls files. In this case, ls files is showing what's on the stage and committed. The last two. X attributes is on the stage, yp.conf is committed. So the point is, sometimes there isn't a simple way to pick out the information you want to see. ls file shows you files that are managed by the repository. Either you have added them to the stage or they've been committed. To figure out which status, you have to use a different way, use a different tool.
Yeah, they log looks like.
I like to use git log.
I think there's like 203 sub-options that you can use. So
Yeah.
It's,
If you want to look at the man page, it is, just a basic man page for Git, or the help for Git rather. And then you can do git clone and get another help page with all kinds of different options on it.
well, do you have the, if you just do the git and then tab, do you have the aliases? Or go back a space and hit tab?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
It is. There's all the primary arguments to get.
Yeah, well, it's not all the primaries, because there's actually a bunch of them.
Yeah, git GUI, there's 319. Git RM,
Have you used Git GUI?
no.
But if you go back to that previous list there,
On Git, you mean?
yeah, just on Git, oops. There we go. So there's SVN over there, where you can actually run your SVN server straight from the Git source project, and then it should have,
Interesting that LS files isn't listed in there, but okay, it's not all.
no, there's, yeah, that's the thing, so these are the primaries, and then there's like 203 primaries total or something, it varies all the time.
Didn't it say that ls was kind of an alias of log, so it's kind of there.
Yeah,
The log shows the history of your commits. LS files just reports which files are.
Okay.
You have your cherry pick tools, which are super fun. You can do dumps. There's your IMAP client. Woohoo, an IMAP client.
I mean, I guess you could pick out any one and say, what does that one mean? But FSCK? Get space FSCK. What are you? We're gonna FSCK the Git repository, or what are we gonna? I mean,
We got 319 possibilities.
yeah.
Just do a dash help after that.
Whatever. I think good.
So is it, okay, because it keeps like a,
I got a CK on Git
Well,
repository.
if you think about a file system, which is basically an index of inodes, Git is a file system.
okay, so it can check its own integrity.
Yeah. And it checks integrity by verifying that the relationship between each hash and the repository is valid. Instead of checking inodes, you're checking hashes.
So it's a different kind of integrity than what you get in the file system.
Right.
Okay.
Similar concept, but instead of looking at inodes, you're looking at the hashes in the repository to verify that each link and each reference there is valid.
You
Yeah,
have-
I don't think I would have overloaded that keyword. I would have called it a DBCK instead of an
Yeah,
FSCK.
it's still a file system. What I'm thinking is the inodes could be okay, but the hash is wrong. But it's still a file system.
Lee, I sent you a link to a Git workflow thing for the end of your talk in your email.
The first one, oh yeah, the Git SCM.
No, just a few moments ago. So whenever you get close to your end of your talk, I have a workflow that can help everybody.
Okay.
Of course, Stanford can always put an alias in to call it DVCK.
All right, so we looked at status, change in file and watch the result. That's a good thing to demonstrate. I know passwords in the repository. Let's delete a line.
You didn't commit it, did you?
No, I didn't commit it. Notice that it tells me password has been modified.
Can you do git diff password?
You stole my thunder.
Guess what?
Okay. Awesome.
And it tells me that, oh, the new version is missing this line. It can get a lot more complicated than that. If
You
you
can
got
actually do per character diffs. It's awesome.
No, thank you.
Save that for the next demo.
That needs a graphical interface to make that work.
All right, so we changed the file. We looked at the diff. You can also do a
Wait, what is that?
standby. You can also do a diff between a file name and any other version by doing git diff file name and then the hash.
Or it could be a hash and a hash.
Yeah, hash and a hash, file name.
Yeah, you can do you can do like a -3 head, and you can look for the thing that was 3 steps back from head.
Yeah.
It's all kinds of crazy options.
How would you, like if you want to get the, compare a file to what it was, say, 8 months ago?
So you showed this earlier. You would probably want to do a git log and then that file name, and then you would get the history of that file's log. So you aren't getting the
Filter
history of
down.
the entire universe.
Right.
You're getting a scope.
And then you just look back 8 months ago, see what the commit was 8 months ago with that hash, and then do git diff file name and that hash to say what's the difference between the current file and that version 8 months ago.
You're gonna want to pipe it through less.
Well,
It'll page for you.
But
Yeah.
you can also, you can do git blame and then file name and see who changed what line when.
Can you ask it what was the condition of the file on March 1st of this year, or, You do it
Well,
by
the
date?
log will give you the time, you can find the time window through the log, of course. But yeah, I'm sure there's probably one of these 203 options that will let you search.
I will say, one of the things I have found is that Git doesn't care about timestamps. It cares about commit times. So the timestamp could be different on a file, but the file matches what's in the repository, and Git will say, hey, it's the same as that version, even though it's a different timestamp.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even use, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I wouldn't even use the word cares about the commit times. It cares about the hash of that particular Git num. I'm thinking more subversion, and every check-in and check-out increments the version number of subversion. Right. It's a version number system, not a timestamp system.
No, it's neither. It's a hash.
Yeah, in your case, it's a hash.
Right.
It just knows that. Right. It knows that.
It computes a hash of the file.
Yeah.
And then it knows, tracks it by.
Oh, and it tracks it. Then you do a log, and it'll say, well, that hash was created on this.
Right.
Date.
The timestamps that Git will show you is the timestamp of the commit, not the timestamp of the file.
Yeah, and I wonder that, like, let's say you check something in, and then you roll your clock back 5 days and do another check-in. You know, is it really?
Why on
is it
earth
really?
would you do that?
Because it's Stanford.
No, so to answer your question, it does exactly what you tell it to do.
Yeah.
If you tell it to do something stupid, it'll do.
I mean, is the timestamp really a timestamp, or is it an ASCII character string that represents a date in history?
I don't know, and I don't care, because it is stored in Git with a timestamp for that hash.
Okay.
And the hash is all you care about.
Yeah, in a friendly world where you have your net time sync working, that's going to work like you would want. Now you can.
Oh yeah, I don't recommend you do what I do. We don't want to live through George Washington's time again, where we go from Julian dates to Gregorian dates and all skip 21 days in February.
I thought we used that.
Unless we actually want to look at the code that George Washington wrote. I have had to look at anything George Washington.
All right, guys, back on topic. Okay, so at this point, we have made a repository in Git. I've shown you how to manage it. I will leave the rest of that exercise up to you. And at this point, as Andrew loves cats, I put one of your favorite logos in here. We're all happy, right?
It's not a gray cat.
Put dog picture in for me.
Nah. But wait, there's more.
Now you sound like Riker.
We did Etsy. Yeah, well, I don't care about that anymore. What about a backup? How do you back up a directory or a repository? Well, there's this concept of a remote repository. Let me show you a quick example of that. I'm going to go grab a remote repository and then show you what it leaves on my machine. I'm going to check out a repository on a server in our lab at this path name, /use/scm/nagadmin.
Do you want to put the protocol in there so people can understand that?
It is SSH by default. I only use SSH. So you could put a protocol in here with WebDAV or NFS or whatever if you wanted it.
But the point is you have to have an account on the machine. you're
Correct.
writing to.
Correct. You have to have a login on the machine.
You can use HTTPS and pull things down publicly too. That's how you can pull down things off of GitHub and stuff.
You can do a million different ways to make a connection. Use a million ways to make a connection. But I use SSH by default because I've always got an SSH connection to the machine, and I don't have to worry about any other configuration getting in the way. Anyway, the point is, git checkout hostname : repository.
So this is different than cloning one.
No, I think he wants to clone.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You're right, Andrew.
No, it's okay. Well, he's got 2 spaces up there, that's what's driving my OCD crazy.
You didn't get space?
Yes.
I didn't know you were like that too. You didn't catch it in one of his presentation comments.
Oh, I'm
So
biting
what this is
myself.
gonna do, this is gonna make a copy of.
I'm thinking.
This is what you need to do.
Here,
Look at
that's
it.
just what I was thinking.
All right, what's going on here?
It's just really big and really slow from here.
No, it's really small and it probably don't have a connection.
Do you need to put .get at the very end of that?
Different servers handle that differently.
Okay. So no.
Cloning in.
There we go.
Oh,
There we go.
you just had to look away for a moment.
Notice all the valuable data.
I see a bunch of numbers with no.
Well,
200
so there's numbers with units behind them.
272 or something.
272
Do
objects.
differently, Lee, or was it just,
Say again?
what did you do differently to make it work?
You said,
I made a mistake. The checkout is a version in the current repository. Since
Okay,
I'm not
so you
in
clone
one
it
and complain,
instead. Okay.
I have to clone it because I got to get a copy of the remote repository first. Now, I'm going to go in that repository. It's clean. Last time I made a commit on this thing, October 9th, 2016.
and Steve Limbark did it.
Yeah. This is a project that we need to resurrect. Or I want to resurrect, I should say.
You need me to resurrect, is that what?
Well, we'll figure that out.
Something like that.
Steve kind of wants to play with it too, so I'll let you two compete, and the first one comes up with a meaningful suggestion, I'll let you do
Do
it.
you want me to just give you the answer on the email right now?
Wait a minute, the latest one's up at the top, October 9th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the latest one's always at the top of the list.
Oh, it says headmaster, okay.
And it tells me that this is the head of the repository that you are currently running. It's also implied as the branch, although it's not listed. And there are some other stuff out here, which we'll look at in a second. On the remote end, my branch is origin, so that's what I'm on. Now, one of the tricks I use is in the config file, this tells you the URL you use to check it out, and it tells you what the branch on the remote is, and some more of the details about how it works. The point is, this is the definition of the origin, which is the master server, if you will. This is how you back up the repository. Okay, let's look at it a different way. Okay, this is a repository that we use for keeping our notes internally. Okay, that's the stage, or that's what hasn't been changed. This shows me files that haven't been committed. This is actually working when we have multiple people sharing it. This is where your drawing is going.
Can you do a,
It is or fix it.
Say again, Andrew?
can you do a git remote -v? And there's your 2 remotes.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, you can have an infinitesimal number of remotes. I don't think there's a real good limit, but you always have your fetch it versus your push,
Okay.
different ones.
So if I want to, okay, how do I say this? Stan, if you had your Etsy in a repository, you can create a remote repository somewhere. Again, SSH is what I use by default. You can save your remote repository, your local copy to that remote. That's the second line, push. You push changes from your local copy to the remote. If you want to see what's new on the remote copy, you fetch.
Those darn easy to understand words.
Are you saying they could be two different places? I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
okay, that's what's confusing me.
get from here, push to there?
Right.
So see where it says master over to the side there? So that's, you could actually have it say server 1, server 2, or you could say, you know, production or staging or development. You can create a pretty much unlimited number of remotes.
You know, or get from the master but push to the development or build or whatever.
Isn't master the name of the branch?
Well, so that's where this particular example might be, you know, not so easy because, you know, if you had like, let's just say that master said GitHub instead, okay? You would have a GitHub fetch and push so that you could fetch and push from GitHub. Then you could have a local Apollo get fetch and push later.
Or
So you could potentially
Or
have
company Apollo. Not local. Apollo could be your company or repository. GitHub would be your public one.
So you could
Okay, so
fetch
you-
from a particular remote and a particular branch, work on it to your heart's delight, push it back there, and then go work on something from somewhere else, all within one repository.
So the branches, that's a mechanism to allow the branch to be on different servers.
It's ultra distributed to the insane N+1.
Yeah, you can have any branches on any server. As long as they match when you're trying, you know, your branch is the same as the one you're trying to push or pull to.
So I can see how that, I mean, you can tangle it up pretty good, but I can see how that's very handy for things like the Linux kernel.
Oh, yeah.
You know, those guys over there have their branch on their server, and he's got his other one on a
And
different.
this is how Linus always wanted to do the development, is he wanted somebody to give him a URL that he could pull from. And that's what he was doing, is he's like, what's your URL? And he would just do a fetch, or, you know, just kind of clone their copy and work on their stuff.
And he could merge that into
Right,
his
but
development master.
so instead of actually doing a new checkout every time, all he had to do was add the remote, do the pull, or do a fetch and then do a pull if he wants to, and then he could get all of that information. And then optionally, if he had the rights, he could push back or do whatever he wanted, or he could merge it from remote to remote within his own environment and have,
Because
he
they
could do
were-
branch merging. So,
Okay, they would be separate branches, but local to his copy.
So for example, if you type in like git push, you can put in master, master/master with this setup. And so that would be the remote name master and the branch name master.
Oh, so where you show those, the fetch and push, the word master up there is not a branch name?
So in this example, it's a tiny bit confusing because of that. But in front of Apollo, it probably would, the example would probably be better with like origin or remote server, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
So
So that's not a branch name?
No.
Okay.
It's kind of like a tag for that remote.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a master reserved word, and there's a master that's used as a label for the entity, right?
Oh.
Two different uses of master.
Yeah, because I assigned the name master to that remote repository originally.
So there could be another remote entry that said, you know, Lee's branch, then it could be GitHub, whatever, and fetch only, so that really lets me pull stuff down from his.
Yeah, you're gonna typically have a fetch note and a push for everything, but you can selectively choose what you fetch from and what you push to. So, but you're gonna want to be able to talk both ways.
I mean, if Lee said, well, no, you can pull, but I don't ever want you to push
You
back.
might not have the rights to push, but your
Okay.
local configuration would want to know that, hey, where.
He doesn't give me an account, so I don't have permission, okay? Because these get configured kind of sort of automatically when you start doing.
No, you can just type get remote add and type in an URL and you can just add to your heart's content. And whenever you get nits without anything, it's empty. It's like, hey, I don't have any remotes.
That's awesome. All right, so.
Is there more?
Save to remote. We talked about these topics. The remote repository basically gives you a backup. If you're creating it from scratch, get remote add, backup, or whatever you want to call it. Here's your server credentials, username, add a follow, or you don't need the username if that's your default user. And then :/path. Remember, that's why you use the checkout or the clone for remote. Get push, get pull, whatever you want to do. All right, we talked about get ignore. This is the format we recommend. Thanks, Andrew. He had clued me into that a while back when we were originally talking about the example. That's one of the problems I had trying to figure out how to do a directory.
Yeah.
So ignore everything and then unignore specifically what you want in the repository. In this case, for those 2 lines, you would have what in the repository? Say again? Steve?
2 directories?
Okay, 2 directories. Those are,
I'm not sure what that last thing was.
no, forget the 3rd one. That's dot, 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 dot. So in this repository, you would have tracked Etsy and home LBL. And that's how I back up the files. So I've got 2 or 3 of them. In fact, I just built a new MX server by taking a micro SD, throwing a bootable image on it, installing Git on the bootable image, cloning the repo into root, and I had a copy of the system reboot, and it came up as the version in the repository. We talked about versions. We said get diff file name MD5. And we have some other resources here.
Oh, and you can use other symbols like the minus number, like the 5th version for the current one.
Yeah.
And that's the exciting one because that big MD5 is just tedious to copy and paste.
Technically, it's a SHA-1.
Okay, SHA-1.
Well, okay, the SHA-1 is tedious to copy and paste. And a -5 would be so much easier to type in.
No, you're not talking about this one.
Problem to cut and paste.
You're not talking about this one.
No, I just sent you another thing that's going to help answer the general, how do I use this in my business question.
Uh-oh. The Centron?
No, the previous one. That was the
There it is.
answer.
Hang on, I see it. Justin Heilman?
Yeah, that one. This is not a small page, but it does have a lot of humor.
Hey, what draws that picture, Andy?
Sorry?
What utility draws that?
It's a GIF.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but there's something that draws it.
Created a GIF. I know it's a
I'm
GIF.
going to assume that a piece of software that creates graphics that he chose, I don't know which software he used.
And there's dozens of them out there.
We're looking more about the
Yeah,
content.
I understand. One of my questions was going to be, has anybody developed a really nice graphical user interface? One of the reasons that,
How many hundred would you like?
well, that's the problem.
Can you scroll down? There's a funny part about peeing in the pool.
But
On those graphical interfaces, the older ones to my experiences, were better than the newer ones.
You know, I guess I'm gonna go.
Changing history has far-reaching implications.
Zoom in.
Danger will run
So this is a very thorough resource for kind of understanding how to use this type of distributed system with lots of people and feature branches and all kinds of crazy things. And you don't have to follow it, but you can read it. And I believe at the near the very bottom, there's an actual workflow. There you go, a little bit down. There's the workflow.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows you which command to rescue yourself.
Well, that makes it all simple then, doesn't it?
Everything is going
Okay, if anybody would like this link, shoot me an email.
Just put it out to the mailing list.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
like that link.
Yes, me too.
It's not off topic either.
Just put it on discuss.
Mm-hmm. He's going to do it even as we speak.
Power of technology and stuffs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can't we use that interweb thing?
All right, it's on discuss.
That's where all the cats are.
All right.
All right, what else? Hell, I did lose the presentation again? All right, that's it, I quit. And thanks to Valerie for the munchies.
Don't know, are there some wings left? Someone, feel free to take them home.
Okay. We will see you all at the next meeting, or barring that, next Thursday. Well, I guess next Thursday is the next meeting.
No, tomorrow's the meeting.
Well, there is one tomorrow, but lug is next week. I'm looking forward to that. Ken's TCP dump, or whatever tool he's going to use.
Who's the subversion expert in the room?
You are.
I will be tomorrow. As soon as I pick your brain tonight. So I've been treating just the primitive use, you know, check everything in the trunk. When you get it's like, I want to keep that, make a copy of a branch tag. Yeah, I'm probably calling it a branch, but I should have called it a tag. And everything's always only marched forward from here. But then all of a sudden they do want me to go back and find one of those tags and make a change
Do you
to it.
understand any of it?
Correct.
So don't change the tag.
Explain it
Copy
to me.
the tag to a branch.
Branch.
Yeah, copy.
It's gonna be one of
I mean,
those
the
things
branch
you
tag.
can't do.
I understand that's a pseudo concept. Everything's just a copy of another.
Good idea,
another
where the
trunk.
pitfalls are.
A copy of the trunk. That's what I'm saying.
Thanks for coming.
What you can do is copy.
Take care.
You have any questions?
You got,
So copy that tag to a new tag.
so let's say you had 10 revisions, and